Welcome to Conversations on Faith and Family, a faith-based podcast for parents and marriages looking how to manage and balance life with greater ease and fulfillment. Here are your hosts, Manuel and Raylene.
Hello, guys. Welcome to another episode here on Conversations and Faith and Family. We're really excited. We just have really been seeing a lot of doors opening for us. We really hope you've been blessed. A lot of the things that we have, the content we've been putting out has just been, for me, a blessing. And it's just been fantastic. And hopefully you've been just as blessed. And it continues today. We want to continue this whole theme of encouraging your life, bringing direction in your life. And quite frankly, our next guest is one that I really find a great influence in, balancing life and just you're changing your perspective on how you see things. We actually just recently had a conversation about this device I plan on possibly bringing into my life. It's a phone that just simplifies things, but just her outlook on life is just very encouraging, and I really admire it. So today we have on the podcast, we have Abi Stumvoll. Welcome. We appreciate it. And the crowd goes wild.
So nice to be here with you. Excited to be doing this.
Cool. So, on that topic, I know that I'm trying to convince myself to get that phone. Basically, if anybody doesn't know, I completely forgot the name. Maybe you can send me a message on Twitter or Instagram. But it's a phone that literally, it's small. It actually can shoot text messages and only dial a few phone numbers, but it's not a smartphone at all. So the whole goal is to be able to spend more time with your family, focus on the things that are important, and hopefully I'll be convinced of it. But yeah, on that topic, Abi, why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are and your ministry and everything?
Yeah, well, I live in Redding, California. I'm on the pastoral team at Bethel Church here. I was a pastor in their school in the supernatural ministry for years, and now I travel with my husband. We have a consulting business where we travel and do ministry, but also we have a consulting business where we help people overcome the places where they're stuck and the blocks that they can't get over in their life.
Man.
So I always tell people we're good at it because we were such messes. Like, we were so broken. Me and my husband were we can identify with so much of the torment that people go through in every way. I used to tell my interns, I was like, pretty much there's nothing that somebody has gone through that I can't identify in some way. And they didn't really believe me. And then as they spent like 5 years with me, they were like, oh my gosh, you really can. You really have gone through a lot. So, we grew up in really, with just different reasons for why there was a lot of brokenness in our life, but same kind of idea. And as God has taken us on the journey of overcoming, I love the stories of like the Todd Whites where they're like, I encountered God and all my shame was broken and my whole life was changed. Like, I love those stories. Those are so hopeful unless they don't happen to you. And then they're really not hopeful at all. You're like, oh my gosh, I've gone up to every altar call.
Yep.
Why has nothing miraculously changed in my life? And I was that person. I grew up in church and loved God, knew God, heard God's voice at a young age, had a real relationship with him. Like, I don't actually ever remember not knowing him. But here I was having anxiety attacks and being suicidal and having so much shame and so much self-hatred and depression. And so I had really like two very different things. And I really was that girl that was like, I'll go up for every altar call. I'll do whatever. And God didn't miraculously set me free in an instance. Mm-hmm. Although he was very involved in my freedom process, it was a process, which I hated in the middle of it because everybody wants the great story. Yeah. Everybody wants like an angel to come down and put a coal on your mouth and then like all of a sudden it's different. But for me, it was a process, and the beauty of having to walk out process is you can lead other people through the process.
Yeah, and what's so first and foremost, I just want to say thank you for your just being completely vulnerable and transparent with us. That's one thing I know a lot of people have mentioned, and even for me, it's been a great influence. I've always been transparent with my life, and a lot of people wouldn't do that, but I'm assuming that being transparent, being open, leads to freedom.
Yeah.
Now, how would you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Oh my God. Well, you can only be loved as much as you're known.
Yeah.
So if you are living where you're not being known, you are stopping the amount of love that you can receive. And connection really happens. People think that by hiding weakness, you are creating safety from being rejected. That's why people don't share things. They're like, I don't want to be rejected. I don't want people to think poorly of me. But the truth is that vulnerability is always an invitation for more intimacy and more connection. I tell people all the time, I'm like, you're trying to look perfect. Nobody even likes perfect people. like why are you trying to be perfect? Like that, like the most perfect people everybody are frustrated with.
Mm-hmm.
So vulnerability allows, for me, a huge value I have in my life is living everything in the light. And I say whatever is in the darkness can grow mold. Yeah. Like whatever is in the darkness, it's kind of like the accuser has free reign to lie to you and torment you about anything that isn't in the light.
And do you think, do you think that has a connection with actually living your life the way God intended for you to live your life? I feel like today there's a lot of people that, that reach an age where they're 30 or 40 years old and they have so many regrets. They wish they could have done this. They wish they could have went and traveled the world. Do you think that vulnerability and regret and living that life you were intended to be is connected as well?
That's an interesting question. I have never put vulnerability and regret together. Mm-hmm. My first thought is, Bill Johnson says regret is like one of the biggest killers of your soul, which I love.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It will eat you up. Mm-hmm. I think I tend to, I would say for me, with regret, I'm always self-compassion is typically the thing that I do mm-hmm. to work my way out of regret, where I actually really do look back at where I was at in life and why I was making those choices. Okay, me and my husband, when we got married, my husband grew up in a family where rage was normal, and I grew up in a family where my dad was really angry at my mom. And my mom was really sick, and I blamed my dad's anger for that. Mm-hmm. So I had this vow, no one will be angry at me. No one. I will not let anyone run me over. Yeah. My husband came in with anger as being normal. It wasn't even mm-hmm. malicious. It was just normal communication style. Yeah. So he would rage, and I would rage back. I'd be like, okay, screw you, and so when I look back at our first year of marriage and I see we were, we weren't throwing plates at each other, but plates may have been thrown in general. Yeah. And I look back at that, that was 10 years ago. I think no part of me has regret. I'm oh, I know what got us to that place. Yeah. I know the pain that was going on inside of us. I know the tools that we didn't have. There's no way that I could have magically been different than that. Yeah. The only way that you learn and grow is by learning and growing. And yeah. Oprah has this great statement. She says, now that you know better, no, actually Maya Angelou, I think, says this, now that you know better, do better. So anyway, yeah. Those are, I think about I think vulnerability helps you in being honest about what you regret and invites people to help love you and process well. But then I think compassion is really what can help you get past it.
I have to say, even just for myself, and my wife and I, we grew up in church. We have two different backgrounds, and it's very, I would say, very similar to to the way you grew up as far as being in church, being involved, and even some of the things I dealt with. I dealt with rage. I dealt with pornography. Never really dealt with drugs, but those things, nothing immediately was broken. I didn't have any crazy moment at the altar. It was literally a process where, I remember at nights, when I was a teenager, like literally just crying because I didn't want to be angry anymore. And again, it was a process. Now, I know that there's a lot of people that deal with things, especially in our generation today, that they hide a lot. They hold things in. They whether it's rage, whether it's addiction, whether it's any type of abuse, they hold it in. They don't want to share it with anybody. They don't trust anybody. Now, one thing that I love about you is that you live life free. I love that about you. For me, I think you're such a free spirit. I wish I was more like that. I feel like I'm more conservative. But, what would you encourage somebody that is in that position where they just are holding everything in? They don't want to share their heart. They don't want to open up to anybody. How would you encourage them to be more open?
Yeah. Well, sometimes logic helps me leverage why I should do something.
Yeah.
So I logically have learned that feelings buried alive never die. And it's like people will try over and over to get out of a habit by themselves. And then they'll get more and more hopeless because they can't. And I've seen that. I remember when we saw a counselor in our marriage. And I remember the counselor being like, I know that you guys have great reconciliation after these huge explosions. Do you know that you could actually have connection without the huge explosions? And it was like my mind had never thought that. My mind had never even conceived that. And I think about, I've just gone through lots of seasons where feedback, I remember seeing this one counselor and I was talking through my high school experience and he said one sentence that was pretty simple. He's like, this is what I would have thought from your high school experience. And it was such a different conclusion than what I had ever thought of.
Yeah.
I've seen how, when you get help, people you get broken from people and you're made to get healed from people.
Yeah.
God uses He loves to use the things that we think are unredeemable and redeem them to bring redemption. So I would just I so believe in getting help. I am the biggest proponent of it is not weak to say you need people to help you figure out how to look at something, to help you figure out how to process something, to share what's going on. And shame is a liar. And so it wants to keep you isolated and shut down and not known, because love really does heal so much inside of us, and shame can keep you separated from that.
That is so good, because again, we're a big supporter as well, and reaching out. I always say that you need really three relationships in your life. Number one, somebody who's above you that can speak into your life, direct your life, be able to encourage you when you need encouraging. Someone next to you who can literally be there. You can let your hair down, be transparent with, honest. And then somebody, I don't want to say below you, but somebody that you're always pouring your life into. And I think if you have those things, it will help with a balanced life. And speaking about a balanced life, you're literally involved in ministry. You're involved in it almost seems like you have your hand in everything. I actually heard you, you were in LA a few weeks ago, and I heard you speak at the conference. And by the way, me and my brother went, and he was raving about you speaking. He's just like, oh, Abby was phenomenal. She was just great. And I felt the same way. Now, how is it that you balance all these things in your life without actually going crazy?
Yeah. Balance is a tricky thing. I think the truth, so I have a chronic health problem that I've had it for 22 years. There's different seasons where it's worse than others. But I have had to embrace limitations.
Oof.
And so, and embracing setting boundaries, which means that means I can't